Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Commotion. I am Roshan Joshi, and I'm here with Dan Smith. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing really good, man. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. We are covering the UFC Fight Night 171. We're doing a quick recap on that. So if you guys like our content, make sure you hit that like button. If you want more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you like any of the music on our channel, make sure you follow Be The Human. His link is in the description below. All right, so getting right into it, man. Hey, you have fun last night watching this?
You know, it was a really good card. There's a lot of good up-and-coming fighters on this card. Man, my boy Lionheart.
Oof.
I'm a big fan. You know, he's my namesake in the UFC right now. I'm a big fan of Lionheart. The good thing is he's still young, so hopefully he can bounce back. But that loss hurt.
Yeah. So Anthony Smith fought in the light heavyweight division against Glover Teixera. So that was the main round, or the main card, and it went the full distance. Well, no, actually didn't. It went the full 5 rounds until it got TK'd at the end. Yeah. So Anthony Smith, he was looking good in the first round, man. He was like sticking and moving a lot. He was definitely the busier guy in the beginning of that fight. But then you start seeing Glover throwing some good combos. Even though he did, I think Anthony Smith actually caught him in the beginning in the bridge of the nose. He got like a nice little mouse. He got a little cut on him. And then Smith also, he was setting up well. So he was doing like a good setup for like combinations 1, 2, got a kick in there. So he was trying to set himself up for success in the beginning. But yeah, then towards the end, you saw Glover just clip him in the first round.
Anthony Smith is really, really good. One thing you'll know about him if you're watching his fights, at controlling his distance. So he's really good at making sure his opponent is staying where he wants his opponent to stay, and he's hitting at just the peak of his range. And he does that by 2 things. 1, finding his jab. So you'll see Anthony Smith in the beginning of a lot of his fights find his jab. And 2, he works in a lot of teeps, a lot of front push kicks. Teep is what we call it Muay Thai, but it's that front push kick, and it's kind of like a jab with your foot, if you think of it like that. And it's really just to create distance, number 1, because Glover Teixera, I mean, he is a move forward kind of guy. He's a brawler. He's big. He's strong, and he's looking to knock people out. So that teep, that push kick, is a really good way to maintain that distance. And Anthony Smith, being the longer man, keeps Glover at his range, and it worked really well. Pretty much for the first 2 rounds, it worked really well. So the problem is that I saw was, and you know, what's funny is we just talked about activity and being the active man, and we had done that in our last podcast. But Anthony Smith is almost too active, and Glover sat and he kind of took it and he returned, and there was some good exchanges, but Glover definitely weathered the storm. I mean, the pace that Anthony Smith was throwing at in the first round was insane.
There's a thing called being too busy.
Yes.
And that's what he was doing. He was being too busy in the early rounds. And you got to consider, it is a different beast when you're doing a 5-round fight versus a 3-round fight. Right. I mean, even a minute. Exactly.
You would think that both Anthony Smith and his team would have game planned for that. I mean, they've been there before. Both of these guys have fought John Jones for that ever elusive light heavyweight belt. And so it's not like this is new to him. It's not like this is his first time in a 5-round championship match. He's been there before. So I was kind of at a loss for words as to what was going on. I was very worried in the first round. I mean, I loved it because I'm an Anthony Smith fan. So I loved his activity. I loved he was finding his range. He was landing some really nice shots right at the tip of his range. That 1-2 was working really well. He was finding a home for that right, and he was working those teeps. It was a really, really nice round. But the pace, you knew he wouldn't be able to keep that up.
And then also you saw that I was noticing a lot as well that Glover started to build his defensive shell in that second round. So you saw a lot of that nice, tight, high blocking schemes. You saw a lot of these punches getting blocked. And he was, as you said, Smith is the longer, larger man. So Glover started creating a defensive shell and started powering his way inside.
Especially with a guy like Anthony Smith and these long guys, they like to play the long guard. So you'll see a lot of like Anthony Smith with his fingers outstretched and he's kind of palming at Glover's forehead. And he's using that to control distance and to keep away, and taller guys can do that. The problem with that is as you open up to palm and to touch, right down the center is open, especially for uppercuts. Mm-hmm. And Glover really took advantage of that, especially in the later rounds. And he rocked Anthony Smith with some uppercuts that was really bad.
Yeah, man. And as you were saying, you have that reach, that palm. You're not really throwing a jab out there. You're setting your straight up. So you actually did see Smith straight up palm the top of Glover's head, and then he comes right down the middle with that straight, and I think he actually hurt him with that too.
He definitely cut Glover under the eye.
Yep, exactly. He right on the eye.
Yeah. And like I said, that's very common with longer fighters, is that you'll see them, that's how they're gauging their range. So if I can palm you on the forehead with my left, I can damn sure hit you square with my right. So that's a technique. It's very common. But again, the downside of that, to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're opening up and if you're nice and long, those uppercuts are there to come right under your guard and catch you. And like I said, that's what happened to Anthony Smith.
Yeah, for sure. And then I want to give Glover some props too, man. They just, that big spinning back fist that he I know how much you hate spinning.
I do.
But
I do not like. At no point do I ever want to turn my back to my opponent. At no point. So I'm not a fan of it, but I'm not going to say that it's not effective and it doesn't work. So.
Oh, it was definitely quite effective, which was cool. So you saw, like, towards that third round, that's kind of when you started seeing the degradation of Anthony Smith really start to catch on board. So these guys are in the pocket, and Glover's dominating within the pocket throughout a lot of those motions, and he even rocked Smith with a pretty big left hand. Took him down and then got that top position and started dominating. I
really thought that the fight was over. The ref let it go. Smith took a really, really clean, bad shot and it dropped him. Glover jumped all over him and started raining down some hammer fists. One thing that I thought was very, very odd was that Glover seemed to be adamant about finishing Smith and submitting Smith, I should say. Mm-hmm. And he could have just sat on top in full mount and rained down hammer fists and the fight would have been over. But he didn't. He gave up on that and was shooting. He kept shooting and swimming for the neck for the rear naked choke. I thought that was odd. I thought that made the fight go essentially 2 rounds longer than it really needed to go. I felt like Glover could have finished that fight way, way earlier.
Agreed. I also thought, and that's where I started seeing that, like, there's a potential that the fight could stop in the third. And this is where the trend started going, where it was like, all right, when are they going to stop this fight? Yeah. Because Glover did start dominating him on top. He was even throwing like great knees to the body. So it was a little weird that they were even going forward from there. But then the fourth round started, and that was
third round on. It was all Glover's fight from the third round on. Anthony Smith took that massive shot, and again, it's at the third round is when Anthony Smith started looking tired, and he couldn't keep up that same pace. And what happens? You start your fight out here, and then as you get tired, your hands drop here, and then as you get more tired, your hands drop down to your waist, and now you're wide open and you're exposed. And Glover has hit those uppercuts before. It's kind of one of the things that you see him do a lot is nail people with uppercuts. And again, Anthony Smith taking shots and keeping his arms outstretched and then lowering his face and has his face pointing towards the canvas. You're going to get hit with a knee or an uppercut every time you put yourself in that position. So I don't blame the ref. I thought the ref did a good job, to be honest with you. Every time the ref had said, you obviously you could hear everything with no crowd. Every time the ref said, Anthony, I need to see some work, Anthony Smith worked. I thought the ref did a really good job. Anthony Smith responded the way that he was supposed to respond, the way that a fighter responds. He said, every time that he said, Anthony, you got to work, Anthony worked. So he's not knocked out. He's responding. He's working. He hasn't submitted, and his corner hasn't thrown in the towel. As a ref, you can't really call the fight there. You have no grounds to call the fight. Anthony Smith is getting pounded, and I don't blame the ref for not stopping the fight. I do, however.
In the third or later on from that?
In the third, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of in the third, definitely in the fourth, absolutely in the fifth. I don't blame the ref in any facet. I do think that onus needs to be on Anthony Smith's corner.
100%. So let's talk about the fourth a little bit. And this was the most interesting part of the fight for me. Because as you said, with Glover, he always has those big uppercuts that he's pretty much known for. So Glover starts the round with a big uppercut. He hurts Smith. He puts in a great combo, and they get in the pocket, and Smith gets rocked. Glover takes that top position. Smith starts bleeding from his eyes and his nose, and that's around the time when, and this is something I've never seen before in a fight. Anthony Smith's teeth are actually getting bashed out of his mouth, and my man is picking up his teeth from the mat and handing it to the ref.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. And you actually heard Glover like not really apologize, but he's like,
no, he 100% apologized. He said, I'm sorry.
Well, he said it's a part of the game. You know how it is.
He goes, Anthony, sorry, man, but it's part of the job.
Yeah. And then he was just like, it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is a little story about Anthony Smith and Glover Teixera, specifically these two guys. So Anthony Smith's first fight ever for the UFC was in Brazil. And I believe it might have been a welterweight. And he got lit up and he got dropped and he got knocked out. And he's in the airport and he's on crutches and he's all beat up and everything's in Portuguese. And Glover Teixeira was actually in the airport as well, saw Anthony Smith, went over to him and helped him get on his plane and helped him navigate the airport and helped him translate everything and made sure he got on his way. So these guys actually have a history and they're both like good guys. Glover Teixeira is known in the UFC world as being just a genuinely good person. And so I can almost see Glover Teixeira like wishing that fight would get stopped so he could stop beating this other guy. You know what I mean? Like stop knocking this man's teeth out.
And listen, man, when you have a total punch count of 297 and you are landing 202 of those 297 punches versus Anthony Smith's 87 lands on 221 or 212 or something like that. Yeah.
212. Glover Teixeira almost landed as many strikes as Anthony Smith threw.
Exactly. Insane. So accuracy too. It was interesting.
Accuracy is part of it, but it's easy to hurt a man when all he's doing is shelling up and looking at the time and waiting for it to be over. I mean, in rounds 4 and rounds 5, Anthony Smith, he threw a couple of slashing elbows, but there was nothing behind him. He was done. There was no offense coming from that man. And Chael Sonnen actually made a really, really good point. You don't throw in the towel when you think your fighter is going to get hurt, right? You throw in the towel when your fighter cannot win the fight anymore.
Yeah, because you get hurt in every single fight. As you've said before, you leave a little piece of yourself on that mat every time you go in and out.
Right. So as a corner, you're not waiting for your fighter to get beat beyond recognition to throw in the towel and wait for something devastating to happen to them to throw in the towel. You throw in the towel when you know that they cannot win the fight anymore. And as soon as Anthony Smith comes over to you between the 4th and 5th round and says, "My teeth are falling out of my head," and your response is, "Give me a deep breath," that's bad corner work.
Terrible.
That's just bad corner work. And I was listening to DC, And what's funny is DC was, as he was commentating, he was saying about Anthony Smith's corner guys. He said, they're really active over there, and they're really barking orders, and they're really animated, and they're having him push the pace. And when you tell your fighter, give me a 1-2 leg kick, and your fighter throws a 1-2 leg kick, and then you just keep telling your fighter to move and throw and throw and throw and throw, and you're pushing the pace of your fighter, he's going to listen. And, it's almost like the Anthony Smith corner exhausted him before he did.
Worst cornering of the night for sure. And
100%.
You heard a lot of good cornering from the other fighters and the other fights teams. So definitely, and it's such a different game when you can hear everything and there's no roar of the crowd.
Well, that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of times just with the crowd noise, your corner gets drowned out.
Absolutely.
So the corner is kind of yelling these simple commands at the top of their lungs, hoping that you'll hear one or two of them. With no crowd noise, your fighter's hearing everything, every command. It's all coming in, and they're responding, and then he gets tired, and then he has his teeth knocked out of his head.
Well, you know what? We still love and respect Anthony Smith. Do not break into that man's house, because he will still mess you up.
Big time. And then, like we said at the beginning, man, he's still young. He's 31 years old. He's definitely going to be back at the top of that mountain big time.
Oh, for sure.
I'm excited to see what a 40-year-old Glover Teixeira can do to John Jones. Glover might have to have one more fight before he gets a title fight, because I think he was 9th coming into this, and Anthony Smith was 6th or 4th or something like that.
Okay.
I think Glover was 9th, so he might have to have one more light heavyweight fight before he gets John Jones. But Glover, he's a 4-fight win streak, and 5 out of his 6 fights are W's for him.
Killing the game right now. Absolutely killing the game. Speaking of young guys, 2 young guys that I absolutely loved watching fight were Hernandez and Dober. Those guys were killers. So lightweight fight, and these 2 guys were, and I have a personal love for not like too light, but I like that lightweight, welterweight, middleweight division, because those are the guys that you get to see a lot of technique and power mixed in.
Yeah, they're the perfect blend.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are the perfect blend. I think lightweight might be the most stacked division in the UFC. You have Khabib, obviously, is the lightweight champion. You have Tony Ferguson, who I know he just took a big L, but he's still a dangerous guy in that division.
The boogeyman.
Justin Gaethje just showed who he was. Dustin Poirier was an interim champion in that division. You have Conor McGregor in that division. You have Paul Felder in that division, who's I think ranked 6th. You have Dan the Hangman Hooker is in that division. You have just dominant guys in that lightweight division and really crammed into the top 10 there.
And also you got one of my lovely favorites, Mr. Max Holloway, that likes to make a jump in every so often.
Every once in a while, but he's got to get that featherweight though.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. But going right back into Hernandez and Dober. So these guys, they started out with great movement right off the bat. You saw a lot of good feet movement. You saw a lot of good head movement. You saw a lot of good exchange between both gentlemen. You saw Hernandez get that first takedown right off the bat. And I felt as if in the beginning of maybe the beginning portion of round 1, Hernandez was kind of edging out. And then you just see Dober put that pressure on him. Something fun that I saw was that little last exchange in eye pokes of the round. We're seeing a lot of eye pokes with these gloves.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's part of the game. When fingers are exposed and they can be extended and outstretched. Obviously with Muay Thai gloves, with boxing gloves, you have that fist; those fingers aren't exposed. With those UFC gloves, those MMA gloves, you need it because you need submissions.
Yeah.
So you need to do gable grips and S grips and things like that. But natural human reaction when somebody's coming at you, you're going to put your hands out. And when those fingers are extended, it's very, very easy to poke somebody.
What I thought was a little bit hilarious and a little bit of karma was they ended round 1 with an eye poke, and then they started round 2 with an eye poke from the other side. So Dober poked Hernandez in the first round at the end, and then Dober got poked in the second round.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's human nature. I mean, it's like low blows, the groin shots. I mean, nobody's really targeting that stuff, but it's gonna happen. You can't, nobody has that much body control. The same thing with headbutts. It's part of the game.
Yep. Hernandez was looking pretty good with his counter punching. So you saw him take a lot of those dips, a lot of those step backs into the counter punch, which looked really great kind of in the beginning of round 2. But then Dober just kept very, very, very heavy pressure and heavy forward movement on Hernandez. And that pressure cracked him.
Well, one of the things you'll notice between the first round and the second round, so Hernandez is very light on his feet, bouncing around a lot, doing a lot of angles, a lot of movement. In my opinion, a lot of wasted movement. I'm not a big moving guy. I'm, kind of much more of the Justin Gaethje style. I just want to plant my feet and bang. But, I understand the movement and all that stuff. But what Dober did was he made the adjustment of, instead of chasing Hernandez around the ring, he cut the ring off.
Exactly. So he stopped him where he was going.
Right. So you'll see a lot more of lateral movement from Dober in the second the second and third round. Well, the second round because it got stopped. But you'll see a lot of that lateral movement where he's cutting the ring off as opposed to chasing Hernandez. And what that forces Hernandez to do is actually be more active, because now instead of having the entire ring to move around and run and do what he's got to do, he has only half the ring. So he has to even be more explosive in when he's changing his range of motion, when he's changing his direction, because that ring's just been cut off. And it also conserves energy for Dober, because now he's not chasing, it's less movement for him to go laterally. So that was the big shift between round 1 and round 2 between those guys, was that ring getting cut off.
And lateral movement is something that is so extremely important within the fight game, like any type of movement. If you are not able to move laterally and you are only moving front and back, you are going to end up getting knocked out by Nogueira, like Rosenstruck did. Yep. So in reference to being able to be multi-dimensional, you're seeing a lot of that with these lightweight guys because they don't have to move around as much weight as well.
Right. And then I thought Dober did a great job with counter punching. I thought that he was really finding his range, and then that's all she wrote in the second.
Yeah, he hit him with that right hook and then hit him with that lead hook right after in a combo, dropped him. He ends up getting, Hernandez ends up getting right back up, or not right back up, but ends up getting back up. And then Dober says, not today, knocks him down again. And I think the ref was totally correct in stopping that fight because
100%. I mean,
Hernandez wasn't staying busy. He was,
Well, I don't think I've ever seen a flurry of punches all land as well as he landed that last flurry.
The accuracy was on point.
I mean, he was lighting Hernandez up.
Absolutely. So Dober took that win with a TKO in the second round. It was an extremely heavy, action-packed fight. I suggest anybody that gets a chance to go watch that. These guys have some dynamite in their arms.
That was a good one. Just unfortunately, those guys are in a buzzsaw of a division. So there's a lot of talent to get through if you want to really make a name for yourself in the lightweight division.
Absolutely. And speaking of the lighter guys, another fun one for me, another fire-furied one was Ricky Simone versus Ray Borg.
Yep.
So that was at bantamweight, and that one was a good one, man. That one went the full 3 rounds, and that ended up being a split decision for Ricky. But yeah, I liked it. These guys are really banging.
Yeah, no, they were definitely throwing. You know what's crazy about Ray Borg is I feel like I've been watching Ray Borg in the UFC for 10 years, and he's 26 years old. Like, I don't understand how he's so young, but I feel like he's been around forever.
It's like the Diaz brothers, man.
Yeah. I feel like these guys have been around forever, and they're still so young. So I thought that Ricky Simone had an absolutely phenomenal game plan coming into this fight, because Ray Borg is a incredibly polished, well-rounded fighter. He has very good striking, he has very good jiu-jitsu, and his transition, his wrestling is also very good. He's very, very high level in everything, but he's not dominant in anything. And that's, I mean, that was his downfall when he fought Demetrius Johnson for the belt a couple of years ago, was that Demetrius Johnson is so good and so dominant in so many facets of the game that Ray Borg just fell short. And Ricky Simone, first off, he's huge for bantamweight. I don't know how that guy makes 135 pounds.
Huge. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like that, like the 40s, the 30s, that's like where you get guys that are walking around at the 60s and they just sandbag that.
Yeah.
But that kid was maxed out.
He looked so much bigger than Ray Borg.
Did they do, if you know, I don't, but did they weigh in the day before or did they weigh in the day of? Because that makes a jump. So, and just so for the audience and anybody that like doesn't know, when you fight and you weigh in the day before, there's a big difference than weighing in the day of, because your body's malnourished, you're not properly hydrated. You drink one 16-ounce bottle of water and your body will hold all of that and you'll gain that full pound. So a lot of people sandbag, they dry themselves out as much as possible, and then when it comes time, they weigh in, they're hitting weight, but then they start eating, they start consuming, their body starts pulling in all the nutrients that it needs again, and every bit of that just stacks on, every pound stacks on for the next day. So you can walk in being, you know, about 8 pounds lighter than you are the next day.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for guys to weigh in at, you know, the division's weight, in this case for bantamweight, 135. And then once the opening bell rings, it's not uncommon for them to be 10, 12 pounds heavier than what they weighed in at.
In the essence of this fight, it just looked like Simone was just towering over Borg.
So, which kind of goes to my point, because if you notice the first round, Simone really focused on his wrestling, and he really focused on changing levels and keeping Ray Borg guessing and taking him down. And it wasn't even necessarily to control him on the ground, because he didn't hold him down all that long in each of his takedowns. And again, credit to Ray Borg. I mean, he's not somebody that's easily manipulated and easily held down. But Simone was just imposing his will, imposing his wrestling, and takedowns count, they're points. So I think there was 8 total takedowns in this fight. Ray Borg had 11. I'm sorry. So Ricky Simone had 11 attempts, 7 successful takedown attempts. So he took Ray Borg down 7 times. And a lot of that was in that first round. So then they come out for the second round, and now the tempo has changed and the game plan has changed, because now Ray Borg is so worried about the takedown that Ricky Simone's letting the hands fly.
And I love that you mentioned levels, man, because you saw it a lot in that fight. Simone was really accurate, especially in that first round. His punching was extremely accurate. He was hitting it dead on the dial. So he'd go with that 1-2 and then drop and get that double leg if he needed to. And that change of level added that bit of fear in Borg's mind, because it's like you don't really exactly know what's coming. So you have to defend everything rather than knowing, all right, let me just shell up because this guy's just going to stand. We're going to bang.
Right. Well, it's also the aspect of knowing your opponent. And if I'm Ray Borg, I'm looking at Ricky Simone and I'm going, he's stronger than me and his wrestling is better than me. So that's a red flag in my mind. I need to be aware of that wrestling. I need to be aware of those takedowns. So that's going to draw my attention more towards that wrestling, which is going to expose me in other aspects of the fight. In this point, a lot of those strikes that came through that I don't think normally hit Ray Borg. Because he's very good with his defense. He's very good with his head movement. He's very good with posturing, creating distance, getting out of the way, evading, and all that stuff. But when you're so worried about the takedown, it stiffens up your legs a little bit. and then you can get caught. And Ray Borg did get caught a couple of times.
Yep, but for his credit, his hands looked so good, man. With the combos that he was throwing, he was popping in those uppercuts. His hands, Borg's hands looked wonderful. If you're gonna lose a fight, lose it like that, because he looked great even in a loss.
Yeah, he hit some really, really good body shots too. And unfortunately, it was just too little too late. He was throwing those body shots in the third. And at that point, Ricky Simone already had 2 rounds, in my opinion. So Ray Borg, I think Ray Borg actually won the third.
I do too.
Because he was letting his hands go. He wasn't as worried about the takedowns, because at that point, like, all right, you take me down, I'm already losing. So I got to kind of go for broke, and I got to knock you out here. And then Ray Borg, once he wasn't as worried about the wrestling, really let his hands go, was really effective, and especially opening up those body shots. If he had done that in the first round, you might have had a different fight here.
And this is one of those things where it's like you see that change in the fighter in the third round, but if they would have had that pace within even the mid to second round, he would have won, because in my opinion, towards the third round, he started dominating pocket presence. And since he was behind on the cards, he started going for broke a little bit more. So I know you definitely loved this. He got that double spinning back fist that he missed on both. He missed the Superman punch. He went for a jumping knee. So there are a couple things that, like, he was trying to get those big hits in, but if he would have mixed in a little bit more with that strong pocket presence, that strong pressure, and then properly set himself up for the big strikes, would have been a wrap.
Well, again, and we talked about this at UFC 249, you can't just throw a Superman punch. You have to set the Superman punch up. You can't just throw a spinning back fist. You have to set that up. Like, these are things that, they take time to develop. So you need to have your opponent distracted, so that you can have that extra second and a half to land one of those strikes.
And that's why these fighters always try to create a pace early on, so that they can dominate and dictate what the pace of the fight looks like. So the best way to do that is with moving your feet and moving your hands. Mm-hmm. Move your feet in, get whatever 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, pop back out, use your lateral movement, pop back in. And that's what I love seeing in these lighter weight fights, in the lightweight, in the welterweight, in the bantamweight. You always see that type of movement.
Yeah.
They stick and move a lot more.
Well, it's easier to have cardio when you weigh 135 pounds.
Darn right. But you know who, and when you're young, but you know who's not young and doesn't weigh nothing are the heavyweights. And in the heavyweights, we had the ever-present Andrei Arlovski versus Philipe Lins. My apologies. Andrei Arlovski, man, I feel like I've been watching this guy fight forever. He's like 40, 41, something like that.
Yeah, right. I mean, he was a UFC heavyweight champ at one point.
Yep.
He was a UFC heavyweight champ. Can we just take a second, by the way? Lins's nickname is absolutely phenomenal. Did you catch his nickname?
I actually did not.
Monstro.
Love it.
It's a great nickname. Monstro.
Love it.
Phenomenal. But yeah, Andrei Arlovski, the guy is ageless, and he looks great. He looks great still.
Oh, he looked great. And you saw within this fight, he kind of switched up his stance a little bit. He's usually fighting orthodox, but he started fighting southpaw in this one. I don't know. Are they on the same team, or do they train together? Or
no,
I think somebody said something in reference to that. So he kind of switched up his stance a little bit, just so that like he wasn't as well seen as everybody always sees him in orthodox. But Lins was actually looking good. So when I went into this fight, I actually did not know much about Philipe Lins personally. I knew a bunch about Andrei Arlovski. Everybody knows the Pitbull. But Lins started bringing in that one. He looked like the least or the lesser of the athletic between the two. So then when Lins started bringing in pressure, started having good combinations thrown in there in the first round, he rocks Andrei with a big counter in the first round. So he was looking really good with those counter shots, and he was landing a lot of clean shots in that first round. So I was actually very surprised about that. And Andrei throws a big I made sure to key in on all the spinning stuff that I saw, because Andrei throws a big spinning strike that backfires on him a little bit.
This is kind of something that we've touched on before about the career trend of each fighter and what these fights mean in terms of that career trend. And Andrei Arlovski obviously is on the down end of his career. He was a former champ, all of that good stuff. Won't take anything away from the guy. He's a phenomenal fighter.
When you're 41, you're 41.
Right, exactly. Linz is on the way up in his career. He's a younger fighter. And I feel like that was the deciding factor in this fight, as I feel like Andrei just had more experience in the cage, and he knew just the little nuances, and a lot of the pressure in the later rounds came from Andrei Arlovski, and Philipe Linz was on his back foot a lot, moving backwards. So I think that's just kind of, that I've been here before, and Arlovski took advantage of it. And I do think that Linz actually is going to have a really good career. This was my first experience with him too. I didn't know anything about him, but I was impressed. His hands look good. Obviously, we didn't really see him on the ground, but his hands look good. And to your point, he didn't look like the most athletic people, but his cardio was there. I mean, he didn't get gassed.
No.
He didn't get gassed. So I'm actually, that's definitely a name I'm going to keep in the back of my mind, and I'm going to look for him on future cards because I want to see how he develops.
And even in the third round, you start seeing him setting the pace. So for a dude that, like, you don't judge a book by its cover, for a dude that does not look athletic, he's highly athletic. Has that cardio, as you just said, that he's still able to push the pace with Andrei Arlovski in the third round.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Arlovski etched out. I personally, so this was a decision win against, and Arlovski won. I personally, and I love Pitbull, man, and I've been wrong before, but as I was watching that fight, I scored it a little different. I actually scored it with Linz winning. So that's just me personally.
It was, so there was no takedown attempts in the fight. So there's no control, there's nothing like that to kind of measure. So at that point, you have to look at aggressiveness, you have to look at ring control, and you have to look at strikes landed. And Arlovski landed 50 total strikes. Linz landed 41. Mm-hmm. Arlovski was also a little bit more active with 107 thrown strikes. Linz 99. So Arlovski threw more and landed more with no takedowns, did have control of the ring, and was at least matching aggression, if not being the aggressor. I feel like they kind of passed the baton back and forth about who was the aggressor in the fight. But since Arlovski wasn't walked down and he didn't have his back on the cage the entire time, I feel like it could have gone either way, but I wasn't upset about this.
I wasn't upset, but I do think they have to change scoring about countering a little bit more. So I had the punch count and stuff in front of me too, and I for some reason, just the good head movement into the counter punching and then counter punching into combinations, like just seeing that type of movement and seeing that type of fighting while they're that close within range, that's kind of why I gave it to Linz. Just because at the end of the day, if you're able to be in the pocket and still be able to move your head and still be able to counter strike and then continue a combination, there's just a level of athleticism that you see there that so yeah, that's why I had Linz winning that one. But so it was cool. It was cool seeing that these guys really threw a lot of strikes, and it's good that we had a good punch count on this because there was a fight where there was only one significant strike thrown, and that was Michael Johnson versus Thiago Moises.
Yes. So Michael Johnson is this enigma of a fighter to me. Because if you look at the list of people that he's beat, I mean, he was the last guy to beat Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, he has this weird, and I know exactly what you mean. He has this weird trend scaling, and if you look at it on an actual chart, you better hope that's not the stock. Because one day your stock is rising high, and the next day you're plummeting to the ground. You're like, what's going on here? Right.
I mean, he's beaten some high-level guys. I think, didn't he beat Dustin Poirier too, I think?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then he gets caught in a heel.
He's lost to a couple of guys too that are not high level.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. He's such an enigma to me because he obviously has the talent. He has the cardio for days. He has the ability to be in the ring with almost anybody in that division. Again, another lightweight, and that's not, we already said, that's not an easy division. There's killers in that division, and he can stand in there with all of them. But you get caught by a heel hook that's not even set up, and you almost roll yourself into it.
2 seconds or like 10 seconds into the second round. So
yeah, 25 seconds.
25 seconds. So that's the thing. Johnson, first round, dude, he was dominating. He was the busier guy. He was landing more shots. I think he got caught with one kick, and that was the only strike that was landed by Thiago.
Yep.
But Johnson Johnson looked great with pressure. He looked great with combos. He walked back to that corner, probably thinking, yo, I won this fight. It was only the first round ended. I won this fight.
Yeah, changing the levels. He was throwing that really nice strike down to the body, setting the hands up high and then coming down low to the body to finish off the combo. He looks really good. And then the game plan changed. And that's what really threw everything into a mix, I guess, was Thiago went back to his corner, and I'm assuming that his corner man was like, listen, man, you can't stand up with him. Take him to the ground. And as you said before, a shooter's going to shoot. So he walked right in there. The first thing that he tried to do was get that takedown. Absolutely. And like I said, and Johnson was not even in a bad position. He put himself in a bad position, and he gave up the leg, and then he turned into it.
I don't even think that counted as a takedown for Thiago, by the way.
It didn't. He has 3 takedown attempts with nothing successful.
Yeah, Michael Johnson definitely walked out of that shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah,
literally.
He's one of those guys. He's an enigma to me. He could be in a fight. He could beat Khabib, and then the next week lose to a guy that's not ranked. He's just one of those guys. I can't put a finger on him. I don't know if it's focus. I don't know if it's training. I don't know if it's ego. I don't know what it is, but he's an enigma to me.
Definitely might just start calling him Magic Johnson, because it's going to be magic to understand what the heck's going on. So moving back into the heavier weighted guys, we have, yeah, man, I know you love it. We have Ben Rottweil versus OSP, and if I butcher his name, forgive me, Ovince St. Preux.
Ovince St. Preux.
Yep. For me, OSP. OSP, baby.
And this was his first attempt at heavyweight, and he was giving up a ton of weight.
He moved up. So he weighed in at 240.
Yeah,
and Ben was like 265.
Yeah, he walks around. Ovince St. Preux walks around at about 240, and then he cuts down to 205 for light heavyweight. So he just didn't cut weight for this one.
Yeah. Real quick, your walking around weight and your fighting weight, I think, are two totally different things. Because my walking around weight is not, I do not feel as fast. I do not feel as agile. There's just a lot that I feel like I'm losing. And honestly, there's no power difference when you're as small as me. So that extra 10 pounds doesn't make me any stronger. It just makes me slower. So.
Right. And then you got to think that Ben Rottweil cuts weight to get to heavyweight, right? So he's walking around at 270, 275, maybe 280. You know what I mean? And then it goes back to what we said of like, this was a day before weigh-in. So Ben Rottweil is cutting weight to get to 265, hits it, and then he's eating and he's drinking and he might have came into that fight between 270 and 275 against a guy that's 240 because he didn't cut weight. That's just his weight.
Mm-hmm.
So Ovince St. Preux is giving up tons of weight to Ben Rottweil, and I'll tell you what, in the first round, he realized it really fast. Oh,
so quick. I that's one of the few times that you see a fighter kind of running around the ring, and not even to his discredit. Like, what the heck are you gonna do? Because Ben was pressuring forward. He kept on pushing forward, putting the pressure forward, all forward movement. And when you're getting hit by a dude that has so much more weight on you, you're going to feel every pound. So I understand why he was trying to use his lateral movement a little bit more, even though it wasn't exactly lateral movement. It was turning your back and moving.
There was a point in times where he was almost in like a full-on run.
Yeah.
Running away. Which again, I'm with you. I don't blame him. I think that it was a mistake for him to move up. I mean, I get it. I guess he just didn't want to cut weight. He wanted to test the waters. Maybe he sees a better opportunity for a championship belt in heavyweight versus light heavyweight. But I'll tell you what, I don't see him in heavyweight contention again.
And he shouldn't be, honestly. He does look like he could be a dominant fighter because he had a lot of glimpses of brilliance. You kind of see in the beginning of round one where he's not really fighting a lot because he realized what he got himself into. So he tries to change up his game plan a little bit. He tries to go for a head kick just because you need some big, hard strikes to be a guy like that down.
So many naked head kicks. So many naked head kicks. And it annoys me. It really
that
does.
Did not get set up. Absolutely.
Yeah, it annoys me.
And when you do stuff like that, what happens is Ben's going to catch your leg and put you on the ground, which is exactly what happened to OSP.
Yep. And Ben Rottweil, don't sleep on his jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt.
Yeah.
He is a black belt. Now, I get it. There's a lot of discrepancies about, different black belts come from different schools. It's all based on opinion and based on your preference and your perception. I get that. But if nothing else, it just shows you that the guy has time on the mat.
At least 10 years, because just about you have to be training for about 10 years before you get that.
So if nothing else, if his jiu-jitsu isn't high level, if he's not a true black belt, whatever you want to argue, okay, but he still has time on the mat. So he's not somebody to be trifled with and to just openly want to get down on the ground with, especially when you're outweighed as much as OSP was outweighed in this fight.
Yeah, which kind of surprised me that OSP actually ended up rocking Ben towards the second round. So he gave him a good rock with a lead hook. Mm-hmm. And then you saw that the game plan changed up a little bit. There was a little bit more clinching involved in that second round as well. So
well, that's a breather. Those guys were tired.
You saw it too, man. You saw it on them.
Yeah, and that's kind of a cheap way to catch a breather is, you get into a clinch and one guy leans on the cage and the other guy leans on the other guy. And you saw a lot of that of Ben Rottweil forcing Ovince Preux to carry his weight, which is it's a methodology. It's definitely a tactic. It's
absolutely. You got to tire out the body, tire out the legs.
Right, especially with a guy that's more athletic than you are. And OSP is definitely the more athletic man between Ben Rottweil and himself. So with that guy, you got to get him tired. And
just for the viewers that have never kind of been in that type of situation, a clinch is extremely energy draining. I literally don't like getting into a clinch with bigger people than me because I get so tired afterwards and I'm like, oh, I still got to fight. Mm-hmm. And if you get swept, if you're in a clinch and they trip you up and you hit the ground, the amount of energy that you lose is real, man. You feel like a different person from when you're standing to when you hit the ground. You get back up and you're like, oh God, my whole energy is just sapped.
I will say though that I would love to see some more high-level clinching in the UFC. One thing that absolutely drives me insane is when somebody has a full tie clinch. And for those that don't know, the full tie clinch is both hands firmly behind the back of the neck, pulling down on that head. Forearms are resting on the collarbones here, and you're really controlling your opponent's posture. It's a very dominant position in the clinch, and it opens up to start hitting your opponent with a lot of knees in the stomach and the chest. And even if you can get that head pulled down, you can knee them right in the face. A lot of people, so if everybody remembers when Rich Franklin and Anderson Silva fought a couple years ago.
Legendary fight.
Legendary fight is Anderson Silva beat Rich Franklin with the Muay Thai clinch because Rich Franklin didn't know what to do with it. So he kept kind of crossing his arms like this and blocking those knees down. And that's just going to get you super tired. It also opens up your head for a lot of elbows and things like that. And then I saw Ovince St. Preux doing the same thing of making that X with his forearms and trying to block those knees. And there's a very easy counter to the full Thai clinch. And it's just, when they have you in that position, you bear hug around them and pull them in tight to you. And then suddenly you're the one that's in the dominant position now.
Because you have the lower positioning of your arms.
Right. You're pinching their elbows in. So like I said, those forearms are on the collarbone and you're pinching those elbows in now. And now you've taken control in dominant position. And I just don't understand why I don't see that more in the UFC. I know it, and I'm not a professional fighter. I don't understand why I don't see it.
And some people, as you said, just have no idea what to do in the clinch. So if we just and not to get too off topic, but if we jump back to last weekend with UFC 249, and you saw Verdum's main best asset was when he jumped in that clinch. Mm-hmm. And if people have just ride out that clinch a little bit longer and use that clinch a lot more to bang out your opponent's body and create that wear and tear and that battle damage within that clinch, then you're going to have a lot more of an effective fight outside of the clinch once you release them.
Yeah. And always strike out of the clinch. Always strike out of the clinch. Always.
So stuff like that is kind of, we're noticing it more. It's not relatively used as much currently, but now we're seeing more and more of people mixing martial arts in mixed martial arts.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that they got the decision right with Rottweil. I thought that he won that fight handedly.
Oh, for sure. But I want to give OSP his credit because he did clip Rottweil twice. Yes. And then even towards the end of the fight, Rottweil might have gotten saved by the bell, man, because he knocked him down right at the end.
There was definitely a Rottweil said that he slipped. They're always going to say that.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely that combination of fatigue too that plays a part. Rottweil was also tired. I mean, listen, I'm sure he would tell you he's not the most in shape person on the planet. He was tired, and when you get tired, the biggest thing I feel like when people see knockouts in the UFC, they don't really understand them, and it's not really about power generated. It's about hitting in the right spot. So your jaw is actually two separate pieces. So your jaw is connected to your skull, right? And there's some cartilage and some stuff in here that connects your jaw, and that's what makes it opposable, and that's what allows it to move. If somebody's mouth is open because they're tired and that jaw isn't tight, when they get clipped in the chin, that's going to shake. That's going to cause that concussive force, which in turn shakes the brain, which in turn knocks you out. So when you can breathe, when you have your breath with you and your mouth is closed and you can bite down on that mouthpiece, you can take harder shots. When you're tired and your mouth is open, that's when you're more susceptible to getting knocked out. So I think that played a role in Ben Rottweil definitely getting clipped towards the end of that fight.
And I like how you said it, where you hit matters, because even taking the face out of construct, we saw a couple of back kicks to the liver in this UFC Fight Night 171, and those things will drop you, man. It all depends on where you hit. A lot of these liver shots, a lot of these kidney shots, a lot of these like physical body shots on your body will turn your legs off like a button.
Mm-hmm. Listen, so what happens is with the liver is you're actually using the rib cage to compress the liver, and it squeezes the liver, and it squeezes all of those toxins out back into your bloodstream, and it is incredibly painful, and there's no amount of willpower that will overcome it. Your body will shut down. Your legs will give out. It's the same thing about, I'm sure we've all been there, you know, when you fall down as a little kid or something like that and you fall flat on your back and you get the wind knocked out of you and you can't catch your breath. That's what happens with your diaphragm. right? Your diaphragm is what helps support your lungs. And I remember I showed you this, of when you're striking somebody in the chest, you don't want to hit them in the sternum, because that, like, you know, that's hard. That's a hard
bone.
That's hard bone right there. And you don't want to really hit them in the stomach specifically. I mean, you can, but in the stomach, that's a big cavity. And it's not really going to do a whole lot of damage. But right between the stomach and the sternum and the rib cage is your diaphragm. And if you can hit somebody there, you're going to force all of the air out of their lungs. And if you force all of that, you're going to have that I can't catch my breath sensation in your opponent. And it's a hard spot to pinpoint, but if you can hit it, it's the same as the liver. It's going to shut you down. So point placement on your shots is very important.
And you're seeing these fighters turn into physicians nowadays, because they will literally mark out places in the body section that have internal organs to attack.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, I know every time I shoot here, I'm hitting your liver. Every time I hit here, I'm hitting your lung. Every time, you know, even though you're not aiming for the lungs. So, and real quick, just fun backstory is and you know the guy, I'm not going to say any names right now, but I one time sparred with a heavyweight, you know him personally, actually. I one time sparred with a heavyweight, and he hit me in the stomach. So I deserved it, but he hit me in the stomach so hard that not only did my legs turn off, but my legs turned off, and I had to walk out the back door because I had to lay outside because my legs were off and I had to throw up at the same time.
Crawled outside?
I crawled to the outside, opened up the door, and proceeded to vomit and try not to poop my pants at the exact same time. So getting hit in the liver is not cool. So finding that pinpoint spot is next level. I would rather get hit really hard in the face than get hit with the same amount of force in the liver.
Listen, with the face, there's a certain amount of willpower.
You can eat it.
There's just a certain amount of gritting it out and just being tough. With the liver, you don't have that choice. That's not an option for you. You're gonna crumble, and you see it every time. And you see it. It takes a half a second, and then the body just crumbles.
And you don't even realize until you take that first step, and you're like, oh gosh.
And there's no amount of powering through it. So
a lot more technicality that we're seeing within fighters nowadays. A lot more thought process, a lot more conscious fighting. You're not seeing guys go out and swing for no reason anymore. You're starting to see guys go out there with game plans, with plans A, plans B, and really start to make this a more cerebral type of fight. Nowadays, you're seeing MMA turn into more of a chess match than anything else.
Well, you have to, because, you know, the days of, you know, just being more athletic or just being stronger or just being able to bully somebody, that's gone. Everybody that's in the UFC has talent. Everybody has skill. You know, I always joke around, and I always think it's so funny when I hear, you know, I'm a big football guy, you know that. And when I hear somebody saying like, oh, this NFL player sucks. And I'm like, the absolute worst player in the NFL is still better than 99.9% of the population at football, right?
Absolutely. In athleticism, honestly,
Right.
I've seen offensive and defensive linemen sprint like crazy.
Yeah. You know, your future bust of a left tackle ran super fast in the combine. And you know, he's enormous. What is he, 365 pounds or some nonsense like that?
He's a mountain.
Yeah. So the athleticism is there, the strength is there. Everybody knows the base level. So now it comes into, I need to be smarter than this guy. I need to be able to set this guy up. I need to be able to manipulate him into doing what I want him to do. So in turn, I can do this, which is going to capitalize on that movement I just made him do. And that's where the cerebral aspect comes into it. It's not just, I'm going to bite down and I'm going to swing as hard as I can, you know, unless you're a Francis Ngannou, who, you know, we established has 2-ton arms with cinder blocks for hands and can just, even if you have a guard up, he'll knock you out through your guard.
Make you knock yourself out with your own hand.
Right. Like, unless you just have that, one of those aspects of your, one of those tools in your tool bag is just so light years above everybody else, like Ngannou is with his strength. You need to have that intelligence. You need to have that game plan, and a lot of that comes from your coaching and cornering.
It's gonna be a lot more of an intense few years. I think we're gonna see a lot of these young guys come out and kill it. I am extremely excited, man.
A lot of parity. I don't think you're going to see, any more of the Randy Couture being the heavyweight champ or light heavyweight champ for 8 years. And, John Jones has been so dominant, and Demetrius Johnson was so dominant. Ronda Rousey was dominant. I don't think you're going to see that anymore. I think you're going to see a lot more parity in a lot of these divisions. Now, you're already seeing it in like the welterweight division, the lightweight division, the featherweight division. There's killers in those divisions. Heavyweight is taking a little bit of time to catch up. I think Stipe was the first person to even defend his heavyweight title successfully. I feel like that belt changed hands every other person that wanted it. So.
No, and I am definitely looking forward to watching these guys, young and old, just grow within the sport. Can't wait to keep on recapping them with you. I think that we are going to have a lot more fun fights coming our way moving forward. Yeah. So I cannot wait, man. I think it's going to be real cool.
One thing, John Jones just called out Francis Ngannou for heavyweight.
Jeez, man.
And I think that is... I would love that fight because it will totally justify my entire rant that I just had on the last podcast about Francis Ngannou is an easy guy to beat. And it was funny as I was rewatching it and I was like, wow, that really sounds stupid because he's so dominant. But I feel like Jones has the intelligence to manipulate Francis Ngannou and pick him apart. I really do. So I would love to see that fight at heavyweight.
You know why I would also love to see that fight? Because I want to see John Jones fight.
Yeah. More than twice a year.
Absolutely, man. So, yeah, I definitely want to see John Jones fight, period. Just get himself out of, like, whatever mindset that he's in right now. Yeah. And that would be beyond a super fight because that would literally be raw strength versus raw talent. Well, raw talent plus, he sharpened himself up very much so.
100%. And I mean, like, John Jones is light years ahead of where Francis Ngannou is in terms of his mixed martial arts ability. And I would love to, because like you said, that is the raw strength versus that mentality, that cerebral aspect of it. And I would love to see who comes out on top.
Love it. And
your money would be on Jones.
My money would be on Jones too. Yeah. We would both not make money off of each other.
Right.
We're probably going to be betting most of the same stuff anyway, half the
100%.
time.
100%.
Well, guys, thank you for taking out some time to hang out with us today. This was the UFC 171 Fight Night recap from the Commotion. I am Roshan Joshi here with Dan Smith, and everyone stay blessed. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
My whole life.